Hello world, Thete here, and exactly 1 year ago my nether looked like this, but after doing a bit of messing around with it, it now looks like this. So I figured I'd take a stroll through the nether jungle build site and show you guys what it looks like from the ground after a year of terraforming. Oh, and if you like what I do, or even if you don't, feel free to gently press the like and subscribe buttons. Now let's get going. So we'll start by stepping out of the nether hub and touching grass, except wait, it's actually moss, because that's green on all sides and doesn't turn an ugly shade of yellow in the nether, and there's a hell of a lot more farmable. What we're walking on right now is some of the oldest land in the build, being around 2,000 days old. Sort of like the Precambrian shield of nether jungle. But if we get down to the coastline, we find some even older terrain underwater, so let's take this boat and go on a casual boat ride through the nether. Nothing wrong with that. As you can see, there's a ton of vegetation hanging down from the nether hub, but there's also a ton of lush, verdant plant life underwater, forming an interconnecting web of greenery. I especially like the kelp forests. They give this place a really nethery vibe. And over here, we have the first of 3 shrines that hold conduits so I can breathe underwater. I'm thinking of someday adding a smooth basalt arch here to connect to the overhang above. Moving right along, we have one of the biggest and most developed caves in nether jungle, complete with an underwater river flowing through the middle. You'll also note that this cave doesn't have any vegetation. That's because it's going to be a deep dark themed cave with lots of skulk and shit. Oh, and you can also see the deep slate ores I've scattered everywhere. They look beautiful with these shaders and blend really well with the smooth basalt. Out in the open ocean, we head into the basalt deltas. You can see a few coral structures lurking in the water. These are, of course, custom designed, not just a copy-paste of vanilla features. And past the southern end of the nether hub, there's an entire archipelago, I think that's how you pronounce it, sticking out of the water, remnants of the basalt columns that once stuck out of the lava ocean here. In addition to the islands, I also made some underwater volcanoes using campfires under slabs to create the smoke effect, and also sprinkle in some magma, of course. There are also a few really deep areas where the smooth basalt gives way to blackstone and magma, and in one of them there's an end-themed shrine with, you guessed it, another conduit. There's also a really deep ravine that goes all the way down to Y11, and some more coral structures sitting around. Moving east into the Soul Sand Valley, I sprinkled a few calcite amethyst glowstone formations to spice things up, and also another conduit temple, this one nether themed. Oh, and on the shore there's a bastion that I didn't have the heart to tear down, so I'm going to terraform it instead, like I did with the nether hub. A lush bastion isn't something you see every day, so that'll be pretty pot. Behind the bastion is an area with shallow seas, a really deep sea node, and some towering cliffs, where I've already carved out space for future waterfalls. That pretty much covers the ocean, so this big beach is as good a place as any to get back on land. As you can maybe tell, I decided to use clay for the nether jungle beaches. It fits with the gray rocks, but is more vibrant than gravel. I call those 3 smooth basalt pillars the 3 sisters for absolutely no reason. They're currently looking a bit worse for wear. They definitely need more moss and detailing. Honestly, the whole area is looking a bit worse for wear due to Enderman stealing all the moss and clay. This nondescript shallow hill partially covers a surviving lava ocean, but over the hill is a really low-lying area. Right now, there's a lot of fugly lava everywhere, but eventually I'm going to replace it with water and turn this into a swampy region. Said swampy region is bordered by hills on 3 sides, and the edge of the nether jungle on the 4th, so let's go beyond the southern hills and back into the basalt deltas. Being a former basalt delta, this area is kind of wild with a lot of chaotic cliffs, but over there I got lazy or wanted to do something different. Yeah, let's go with that. So I made a much flatter area in the southeast corner. I didn't make the rest of the southern border quite mountainous though, with lots of deep valleys like this one that'll have like mountain streams running through them, and even the highest point in nether jungle, this absolutely massive mountain reaching Y95, and you get kind of an awesome view from the top. Further to the south is another mountain stream that cascades down a series of waterfalls to enter a valley and join the ocean. You can actually see something interesting that I struggled with, because in the late 7000s and early 8000s, when I built most of the terrain directly adjacent to the nether ocean, I didn't know what form the build was going to take or where the boundaries would ultimately be. So when I came in with later terrain, I had to do a lot of thinking to connect the OG terrain to the newer terrain that I built after deciding that nether jungle would be a square build with artificial walls separating it from the rest of the nether. The foothills of this mountain are where the OG terrain ends, but up here is the area I'm currently working on constructing, so if you see it changing in between recordings, that's why. It's a pretty high mountain, going up to Y91, but the mountain peaks are currently pretty bare, and this cave is much more interesting. If you're observant, you'll recognize this as the former site of Verdant Station, the gateway to my ocean monument. It used to be a very ugly mashmash of sea lanterns and random green blocks, but after 2 years, I finally destroyed it and replaced it with the Nether jungle block palette. On the northern side of the mountain, there's a steep cliff with space for a waterfall, cascading into a little pool. But as we enter the Nether wastes, things get a bit lower, only to give way to yet more spectacular mountains on the western shore. And yeah, so far, these are kind of nascent and not fully traversable yet, so I guess I'll just turn around and head back to the beach on the eastern side. Now that we're here again, let's take a look at the Crimson Forest sector. On the eastern side, the swamp ends in a massive cliff that leads to the mountainous northeastern section, and honestly, we've got a lot of cool mountains. And yeah, I basically have a mountain range running down the eastern border, and you can get some pretty awesome views from up here.
Huh?
There's also a waterfall cascading like 30 blocks down the mountain into a lake. It'll look good with water in it, I promise. Moving along the mountain range, we get some even higher mountains to the north and this massive valley. And across the valley is the highest mountain in the range, going up to Y90, but there's no river down there. There are also a few cave entrances scattered around, but I'm not going to work on those until I'm done with the surface terrain. Speaking of surface terrain, there are also a few little plains in the areas behind the mountains at the northeast corner. But the bulk of the plains are to the west of the mountains. This huge, flat, low-lying area is going to have tons of massive trees poking far above the canopy. It also has a couple of little Tapui mountains poking up out of the flat plain. In the center of Nether Jungle, the plains give way to this huge mountain, which is a pain to climb, but if we fly up, we find a rather interestingly shaped lake taking up the whole top of the mountain. My plan for this is to break a chunk-sized hole in the bedrock and have the water pour down into this lake. Oh, and there's also a waterfall coming down the eastern side of the mountain before flowing away into a cave. On the southwest side, there's a little satellite hill next to the Nether hub with an overhanging cliff plunging into the ocean. That should be most of the points of interest, but there are a few more here and there. This ugly building currently houses the portal to the stronghold, but I'm going to change it into something better looking someday. Just like I'm going to change this lava lake into a really deep water lake, going probably all the way down to bedrock almost. So basically this massive cliff will continue into the water. Beyond that, we get a nondescript hill and valley occupying what used to be a nether waste with very cursed terrain, so I had to do heavy terraforming to make this look halfway decent. And at the bottom of the valley is another clay beach. Moving westward, we get to the basalt deltas again, with some of the last coastal terrain and first inland terrain I built. This being a basalt delta, there are of course massive cliffs and a massive waterfall, but there's also a really big lake bed that I want to do something cool with. And going to an even higher altitude, we have a random nether portal and some plains where the moss slowly gives way to smooth basalts the higher you go. This happens everywhere in Nether Jungle. Basically throughout the Y70s, the moss gets less and less common, and above Y80 it's only bare rock. There's probably not going to be a snow line though. I feel like Nether Jungle is too lush and warm for that. And yeah, that about does it for Nether Jungle. I'm still working on the terrain, but give me another year, and I should have most of the terrain done and walled off from the Nether, and even begun working on spawn proofing and detailing. With the trees, caves, and other fine details, we'll have to wait until 2024. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.